Damning and explicit text messages revealed during the David preliminary hearing today, allegedly proving the rising music star had a sexual relationship with 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. On top of the accusations that David killed Celeste, dismembered her body, and disposed of it. It's important to remember that he is also charged with sexual abuse of a child under 14. Police laid out alleged child sexual abuse material found on the singer's phone that could be damning if this case goes to trial. I will also tell you about the gruesome new details revealed today about how the teen may have died, which caused a gasp in the courtroom.
The timeline nobody in that courtroom expected. An abortion at 13, a body cam video where he looks her in the eye and pretends not to know her name, and text messages that flip the entire story on its head. I'm going to walk you through exactly how these three pieces don't line up, and why that gap is now the center of a preliminary hearing that could send a rising music star to trial for murder. We're on the crime and consequences. Day 4 of David Anthony Burke's preliminary hearing was supposed to be about digital evidence. Routine, procedural. The kind of testimony that fills gaps rather than blows them open.
David, however, has been, we're told, pretty stoic through it all. New images here, per sketch artist Mona Edwards, of the fourth day of this preliminary hearing in Los Angeles. Today, perhaps the most graphic, explicit, visual, and potentially damning evidence in this case against the rising music star. Joining us now once again, Julia Dang from NBC LA, a reporter who is in the courtroom for day 4 of this preliminary hearing. Julia, this afternoon, a lot of focus on text messages between David and Celeste. Walk us through what I know was a very emotional final part of the day here.
Instead, what came out of that courtroom on Friday reportedly rearranged the entire timeline of this case. And by the time court adjourned, even the victim's parents couldn't stay in the room.
Chris, a lot of damning evidence today as it relates to not the murder charge, but another felony charge in this case against David Anthony Burke. It's the felony count of continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14. Of course, they're talking about the murder case, 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. So we've heard descriptions of this digital evidence before. We've seen this in charging documents. We've reported on this. Prosecutors have described photos they found in David's iCloud account on his devices. They've described text messages between the two of them referencing sexual activity and things like abortion, emergency contraception.
Let's start with what allegedly happened in January of 2024. According to testimony read into the record, text messages introduced by the prosecution reference an abortion appointment for Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Do the math on that, because it matters. Celeste's birthday was in September of 2010. That puts her at 13 years old at the time these messages were written. 13.
Here's what struck me. Here was my big takeaway walking out of the courtroom today. Previously, we heard the relationship characterized as maybe one-sided, right? It sounded like Celeste, this teenager, was pushing for more, and she was jealous of David's relationships with other women. So the text messages that were read aloud and shown to us in court today actually flip that narrative. That surprised me. I was not expecting that during testimony today. But it sounds like David is actually the one who brought up moving in together, spending more time together, a wedding, again, to this child. She was 13 at the time many of these conversations were documented. Having kids. He states in a text message to Celeste's number that they want 2 kids.
Not a rounding error, not an ambiguous age range. 13 years old, allegedly pregnant, allegedly by a grown man who was, by then, already a rising name in the music industry. Now hold the date in your head, January 2024, because here's where the timeline stops making sense. 1 month later, in February 2024, police reportedly show up at a home in Lake Elsinore. Celeste has been reported missing, and the body camera footage from that visit allegedly shows David Burke answering the door, eating chips, acting, by accounts from those who've seen it, almost bored, casual. A man who, if these text messages are accurate, had just weeks earlier been exchanging messages about an abortion for a girl. He's now behaving like he barely recognizes
exchanges, but today we actually saw messages discussing an abortion appointment for Celeste in January of 2024. Now, do the math there. Her birthday was September of 2010. She was 13.
If you caught that contradiction before the reporters in that courtroom did, you were already ahead of the story. Because here's the detail that apparently caught everyone off guard on day 4. Prosecutors allege that same month, Burke and Celeste were also communicating about something referred to in messages as Operation Awesome. Plans, according to testimony, for her to run away from that same Lake Elsinore home. Messages reportedly show him asking if her bags were packed, telling her to bring anything he couldn't immediately replace, calling the day before Valentine's Day her runaway date.
When this purported abortion took place, where we just wrapped court this afternoon, we were looking at text messages where Celeste is now expressing regret, telling David over text that she would do anything to take that back.
And allegedly, the most important day of her life, second only to their planned wedding. She was 13.
I think it just kind of brought things to a different level. I also was thinking, just looking at the timeline here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because January of 2024, they're talking about this abortion appointment. And then I keep going back to that body cam that you described from February of 2024 when she was missing. Police go to her house and he's almost acting as if like he doesn't really know who she is. He's eating some chips. He's very casual about it. And it just, for as much as there's this kind of now dynamic we understand of the relationship through the text messages, I think it makes that body cam video look way more damning and kind of shows just how much he was allegedly misleading police at that point in time and acting like he didn't really know who she was, when clearly these text messages show that this relationship was at a very serious level.
So ask yourself this. If the body cam shows a man who supposedly doesn't know this girl, and the same week's messages allegedly show him coordinating her departure down to the size of her bag, which version was real? Because it can't be both. And that contradiction, prosecutors seem to be arguing, is not confusion. It's concealment. This is where the narrative that's followed this case for months apparently got flipped on its head.
I think it also paints a great picture of just how convincing David can be as a liar. Because when that body cam recording was taken in February of 2024, that's also the time period where we saw text message conversations today in court showing that David and Celeste were talking about something called OA, Operation Awesome, where they were plotting her departure, her runaway from her home in Lake Elsinore. And this struck me too. David appears to be the one pushing this. He's the one who keeps on asking her, do you have your bags packed? He tells her, bring everything you're going to use that I can't immediately replace. Bring a bigger bag. Do you have everything packed?
For a long time, the story around Celeste and David was framed one way. That she was the one pushing for more, jealous of his other relationships, chasing a commitment he wasn't offering. But the messages read into the record on day 4 reportedly tell a different story. Reporters inside that courtroom described David as the one repeatedly raising marriage, repeatedly raising moving in together, repeatedly bringing up having children, allegedly stating in one message that he wanted 2 kids with her. 2 kids with a girl who, according to the same testimony, had reportedly been in contact with him since she was 11. And here's the part that will stay with you. Weeks after that alleged abortion, according to testimony, Celeste is reportedly the one expressing regret.
Are you ready to go? In one of these messages from that particular exchange, he calls that her runaway date, and I believe it was the day before Valentine's Day in 2024. He calls it the most important day of her life, aside from their anticipated wedding. Again, at this time, she is only 13 years old. This is just a couple weeks after, memorialized in these text messages, she apparently had an abortion. And the prosecutor made sure to have the LAPD detective presenting this evidence read messages from Celeste to David, confirming that it is his child.
Telling him, in her own words, that she would do anything to take it back.
And just because I'm looking at the notes here that you sent over today, and this was right before court ended, kind of talking about the dynamic of this relationship, because it had been presented, at least to me at this point, that, this was so one-sided. Celeste was jealous of whoever David was seeing, right? And the reason that he allegedly killed her was because she was going to expose everything. And the text you have here, this is from March 2025. So this is roughly a month, maybe 2 months before she passes away. And Celeste appears to be the one trying to move on post-breakup. She says she is okay with staying friends, but she doesn't want to be connected online. She isn't interested in continuing to have sex with him. And the quote from that text is "without a label," which sounds way more of a casual, kind of level-headed approach to their situation as to what maybe we thought ahead of time.
Not anger, not an ultimatum. Regret. A 13-year-old processing something no 13-year-old should ever have to process. Apparently still trying to hold on to whatever she believed this relationship was. That's the moment this case stops being about a timeline and starts being about a person. Because by March of 2025, roughly a month or two before Celeste's death, the messages reportedly shift again. This time, she's the one who sounds like she's trying to move on. Willing to stay friends, but done being connected online. Done with anything physical, wanting it. In her own words, without a label. If the earlier messages painted a girl who couldn't let go, these reportedly paint someone quietly trying to.
Everything that I heard and saw today in court relating to this digital evidence flipped what I thought I knew about the nature of their relationship. It does not seem to me like Celeste was the one pushing for more. She's actually the one who seems a little bit more casual, a little bit more hesitant in these messages. To me, David is the one who is aggressively pursuing more time together, living together, going on trips together. He's the one who's initiating a lot of this, and you just can't get past her age during all of this. She is 13. She is just barely.
Ask yourself what it means that the timeline shows her pulling away in the final months before she was killed. Now bring the physical evidence back into this, because the same week jurors and reporters heard this digital timeline. They also reportedly heard from the deputy medical examiner about how Celeste died. And one detail apparently caught even the courtroom off guard. Testimony reportedly described a penetrating wound near her diaphragm. The examiner noted it could have been caused by something other than a blade. He reportedly used the word gunshot.
But today, as they were talking about the photos found on his phone and the text messages recovered from his iCloud account, I did notice him hunching over and starting to jot something down. I did notice him having whispered conversations with his attorneys. At one point, this was when, and this was really tough. This was actually what prompted the victim's mother to start crying and both of her parents to walk out of the courtroom, flanked by their attorney.
Immediately, carefully, walked it back, saying he was not speculating that she was shot, only that he could not rule it out completely.
I noticed David losing his composure a little bit. The entire time that I've been watching him in court during this hearing and the status conferences before this, he has been very still, very composed, staring straight ahead, responding when spoken to, and not giving away much with his body language or his facial expressions. Today, when they were talking about the photos, when they were talking about his pics, you could see him starting to fidget.
That kind of caution matters. It means nobody in that room, not even the state's own expert, is treating this case as fully settled.
Of what happened to this 14-year-old. Now, here's what the defense did with that. It was Marilyn Bednarski leading cross-examination of Dr. Grant Ho this morning. she made it very clear. You may have these findings, you may have this autopsy report, you may have these shocking visuals, but you don't actually know for sure what kind of sharp instrument was used. You don't actually know for sure which penetrating wound occurred first. You don't know for sure if they happened seconds apart. And then defense actually insinuated today during cross-examination of this witness that they don't know for sure if the victim herself may have been holding the knife that stabbed her. There were a couple looks exchanged in the courtroom after Bednarski said that. And after the witness did in fact confirm that no, he does not know due to the advanced state of decomposition of the victim's remains.
And that's exactly where the defense reportedly went to work, pressing on what the medical examiner couldn't be certain of, on decomposition, on whether the order of injuries could even be determined
during trial, if this goes to trial. And that's because he was very careful to qualify and explain every single thing he said. Let me give you one example. This generated quite a bit of buzz after it came out during his testimony. He says after palpating the victim's left ribs and noting an area of disruption or damage that he didn't see anywhere else underneath one of those penetrating wounds, the one on her upper chest, the one that caused damage to her diaphragm, he said, this could have been caused by perhaps a gunshot wound. So that raised a couple eyebrows. We haven't heard that previously. I think the general...
If you were in that jury box, hearing a body cam that lies, text that read like a countdown, and an autopsy with an unanswered question all at once, which one would you trust first? Before we move past today, there's one more image worth sitting with. Celeste's mother, Mercedes, sat through this entire hearing, through the autopsy testimony, through the images of her daughter's remains. But it was reportedly the digital evidence, the explicit content described by detectives on the stand, that finally became too much.
Assumption or understanding is that this victim was stabbed and she bled out. That's what prosecutors have been alleging. That's what was in the initial charging documents. So Grant Ho actually revisited that point later, and he made sure to tell the court on record that he said that because he wanted to make the point that it could have been anything. He is not actually insinuating or speculating that Celeste was shot and stabbed. So he's very careful with his language. He's very careful to say things like potentially or possibly when that's what he means.
She and Celeste's father are reported to have walked out together, her attorney close behind. Somewhere underneath every one of these clinical, procedural details, the texts, the timestamps, the cross-examination, is a mother who once packed a lunch for a daughter who liked her hair dyed red, who sat in the front seat of a car taking selfies as any teenage girl would. That's the person this timeline is actually about. I want to be clear about something, because it matters. Nothing here is a finding of guilt. David Burke has not been convicted of anything, and a preliminary hearing exists only to determine whether this case goes to trial, not to determine what actually happened that night. But the contradictions laid out on day 4 are now part of the public record, and they're going to follow this case into whatever comes next. Court resumes Monday at 9:15 a.m. Pacific.
And as far as here we are, it's on Friday. We weren't sure if this was going to continue on into next week, but court is going to begin 9:15 in the morning Pacific time on Monday. Any expectation about what's going to happen Monday and how long this could go for?
I thought they were going to call another witness. It sounds like LAPD Detective Corey Farrell might actually be the final witness for the prosecution.
Defense attorneys have not yet cross-examined the detective who presented this digital evidence, meaning we haven't even heard their side of this timeline yet. What I found out after leaving that courtroom Friday suggests Monday's cross-examination could reshape this story all over again, and we'll be back with the breakdown the moment it happens. So subscribe now, and turn on notifications, because you don't want to miss it. So I'll leave you with this. A body cam that says he didn't know her. Text messages that say he was planning her future. An autopsy that admits it isn't sure. If you had to pick which version of this timeline is the truth, which one would it be? And what would it take to convince you otherwise? Let me know in the comments.